And we're finally into draft. 5 minutes late, but here we are. Here we are. Getting
Always
things
first time the
underway.
charm.
Let's see. Will those who know ban Janna? No, the Katarina ban. Okay, I don't know where that one came from, but sure.
If I remember correctly, one of the players on Mamba does play it, but then the second ban is Nasus. Very expected. Those who know had a very successful Nasus when they played it.
See if we go next. There's
And
their
the Janna ban does come out.
Yeah, they're keeping
They are
up with the
gonna keep
Janna
to it.
ban. Yeah, we've gotta ask about that. That's 3 times now, right?
Will they keep the Garen pick alongside the Garen ban? It might be worth it for Garen to be banned from the enemy team. But if they do play it, it will still be banned out for the next games anyway. As a full
Yeah,
fearless.
this is the crazy thing about doing ultra full fearless is that you ban something in game one and there's no longer any more of that. Oh, but if we play well enough on our new champions, they'll ban those instead, and then we can grab what was banned in game one. Nope, it's just gone forever. So, champion pool is gonna get really pinched here. Bel'Veth.
They also keep the
final ban.
Bel'Veth ban.
Yeah, it looks like those who know what they don't want to play against. That's for sure.
And we see the Yone ban, which does seem to be higher priority in the later stages of the tournament so far. Obviously, having the E to be able to get out gives a lot of flexibility and allows you to take more risks to take turrets.
And there is the Garen first pick. So this is the Those Who Know Classic. We'll have to see how they fare when they don't have it next game. But for now, we'll be able to see their signature champion in action.
Enemy team looking at a Kayle in response. It does give them a scaling option, but we don't normally get past 2 items really. But they instantly also pick up the Yorick, so the side laning presence is already being built.
Yeah, we've seen the Kayle in action before. You can certainly pick champions to help out with that scaling. Pretty much any control mage. We've seen Hui and Kayle has success before. We haven't seen Kayle and Anivia paired, but it's definitely a pairing that could work in theory. We've seen both champions. Those who know, continuing with their beefcake strategy, they've now locked in 7 out of 8 of their champions throughout the tournament have been top laners.
The thing is Jax being able to also deny the auto attacks does gain some extra value into Kayle versus some other champions that are possibly picked within this tournament so far that we've seen.
Next we'll be seeing the Orianna pick. I do believe this is something that we've seen before from Those Who Know, and the Udyr from MgmaCHEESE. That was something that Free Julio has played in the past. So it seems like both teams getting relatively what they wanted out of this draft. Both teams being able to pick champions that they've found that they've had success with before. Now that we're seeing the drafts, what do you think?
I think those who know are very happy with the draft they got. There's a bunch of characters that they've played before. But the enemy team, if they get to this point where they've scaled and the game's at least somewhat close in gold, they probably will eventually win it out through raw stats due to their characters. However, Jax is always going to be good into Kayle. If Jax finds Kayle on their own, Kayle doesn't really have many ways to kill the Jax if the E is available.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I gotta say, like, it is early game Kayle, and now Kayle does famously have a pretty strong level 1. However, I don't think she will be very happy into any of these 3 lanes, so we'll have to see how that goes. I'm also not quite sure about the Yorick and the Udyr have proven to be strong champions in the format, but I don't know if they necessarily pair with the Kayle. They're not exactly the stalling wave clear champions that I had in mind.
And you can't get some of the classic Udyr cheese because players do have to go to lane for at least the first 2 minutes. Whereas Udyr is very good, especially in lane swaps in traditional games, and staying out of lane and just getting enough XP. Whereas here, because you have to go to all the individual lanes, you don't get to get away with some of the initial cheese.
Let's take a look. It seems like for this first game of the day, nobody is predicting. Nobody wants to bet their channel points on game 1 between 2 relatively equal teams.
It will be interesting to see who the Orianna is paired up against in their lanes, though.
Yeah, I think Oriana will have a really good time against the Kayle, but will probably suffer against the Udyr. I can't imagine that a low mobility squishy champion will have very much fun if Udyr presses R and gets anywhere near her. So I would expect to see Oriana go mid, because then at least if she runs into the Yorick or the Udyr, the lane is short enough that she can run back to her turret. I would be surprised if she goes into a solo lane. I think she could get run down by Udyr, or if Yorick lands a single E, she could also be run down by the ghouls. Otherwise, I think that the Garen and Jax could pretty much go wherever. If I had to guess completely, I would probably say we're going to see Orianna versus Kayle mid. Kind of the same logic for Kayle, a little bit of that safer option, and then we'll just be having two traditional side lane matchups, neither of which necessarily favor one side over the other.
It will also be interesting to see if the Garen does go for the full speed build and just tries to run down this Kayle later on into the game.
Looks like we did get to have 10 channel points bet on
MgmaCHEESE.
So yeah, we got the low risk, no reward bet. Gotta love it.
I feel if the feats of strength are acquired by the Garen and the Jax, I do think that it actually favors that team, and the boots being brought has a higher value. Whereas for the Yorick, the Udyr, and the Kayle, there is some value in the boots, but the stats from the purchases that they will be making may not be as valuable as the symbiotic souls potentially on the opposite side.
All right, let's see. Pray no spectator bug for the first game of the day. All right, nice. Let's see. It does look like the Kayle will be going onto China person. I would say that has been MgmaCHEESE's best player, so definitely makes sense that your late game carry is there. Whereas it will be Brainer who is going to be piloting the Orianna. In my opinion, Brainer has been the best member of those who know. So. And of course, as expected, it will be free Julio on the Udyr. Something that Julio played before. I know something that MgmaCHEESE has been heavily reliant on. I saw they were doing a little bit of draft discussion, and they were saying Julio needs to get Udyr. If it gets banned away, that would be very sad. Fortunately for them, it did not get banned away. They will get to play it this one time, so we'll see how that goes.
But it will only be for the one time. Similar to the Garen, both teams will have to figure out some other picks, especially if we get to Game 3, that they have not shown yet.
Yeah, speaking of the Garen, we do have the Smite. Smite teleport coming out for Garen. 6 teleports across the board, and as I'm looking at it, I see only 3 people with green runes, so only 3 potential demolishes coming out here.
It is interesting to see that the Udyr doesn't... There is a massive potential for the Udyr to run it. You can kind of just sit under turret and not really feel any threat from the enemies necessarily of being killed, and just get the demolish and run out.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Garen actually doesn't have demolish either. He opted for conditioning overgrowth, so definitely a little bit more of that traditional scaling setup.
You also see the Udyr with the tier start, which might mean he loses out on some very early priority, but does mean he gets towards his items quicker.
Yeah, and as expected, we will see the Orianna run mid. However, they're sending the Udyr mid instead of the Kayle, so potentially Jax will be able to take advantage of Kayle early. We'll have to see.
The Orianna, though, if he's able to poke across the wave successfully with only the tier start, the Udyr might find it hard, especially with the runes choices as well. They might not have the sustain to be able to keep in the lane if they start losing the priority over the wave.
do you put them back together again?
Yeah, and of course, starting with the tank Jace that Flandre debuted in the LPL, we have been seeing a lot of champions gravitating towards the new flavor of the month build, being the Unending Despair rush into the Fimbulwinter. We'll see if that's what Free Julio ends up going for.
It would definitely help with surviving against an Orianna's range advantage. And the damage that comes out from that build is still relatively good. I think the screen share on the Discord's gone, by the way.
No. Something a little bit cool to note is that Izanagi's Barden did decide to start the E on Garen. E start on Garen, definitely a lot better than that Q start. I know a lot of Garen players like to start Q. They like the idea of walking up for that trade with the auto Q. But as it turns out, auto E does way more damage. The problem is that you go auto Q and then all of a sudden your champion does absolutely nothing for the next 9 seconds. So from talking with higher elo players, it does seem like that E level 1 start on Garen is the preferred route.
We do see the swaps from the Jax and the Garen also come out. Both do win the initial push, which means the CS is now stuck in front of the turret. Red team will be looking to get 2 simultaneously freezes, and if they are successful, this will be really difficult for the Jax and Garen to get into XP range.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm slightly confused about the swap. I feel like when you're trying to go against Kayle, you want a champion who can put in a lot of pressure. And the problem with Garen, of course, not super strong in lane until he gets that level 6. And even when he does get the level 6, he doesn't have flash, so not quite sure how he's going to be able to punish the Kayle that way.
The Yorick was chunked from the Garen, so the Jax should have a relatively easy time in that lane, however, already. And Orianna is already getting that poke trades onto the Udyr very low after the Q lands as well.
Ooh, night drop from Yorick. Wall lands, flash burn from Giles. Yeah. I would say the Udyr probably going to be fine. Still has that empowered W, uses it right there. Can heal off of the wave. Actually going in aggressively.
Yeah. The shielding comes through, but it's still very aggressive. He does have to flash if he needs to space it, which he will have to use. Orianna has flash as well. Might be able to find the Q flash onto the Udyr here. The shielding is timed. The Q comes through just after the shielding falls, and that's the first blood for the Orianna.
Yeah, you have to wonder if Udyr had E there. I don't believe he used it at all. I know that sometimes Udyr players will opt to not skill abilities. I wouldn't be surprised if Julio was rocking double W, or yeah, 2 points W, 2 points R. And yep, that's exactly what he did. 2 points W, 2 points R. So no E for the stun. Maybe going to be regretting that one a little bit. Could have possibly survived if he had it.
It does bring in a small advantage. The Udyr does keep the TP advantage though, as Brainer TPs in after taking their back. The new early game guards do give quite a lot of move speed after respawning, so it is relatively easy to get back to lane if you do die, and you might not even have to use teleport depending on the wave state.
Yeah, death home guards. Yeah, home guards across the board decreased by 1 second, but the death home guards buffed from 7 seconds to 20 seconds. So definitely a lot easier to get back to lane after you've died.
But this Udyr is already starting to struggle. Picks up the first minor magic item, which is probably going to be what he has to rush in this game, even with the for threats. Drax is kind of low here on the Yorick. Gets some nice trades, but it's probably not going to be able to get out of there, and does fall.
Yeah, definitely way too aggressive from the Jax there. It was just up in Yorick's face. Yorick was able to land 2 or 3 Qs for free, and that was enough that he could just chase down the rest of the kill. Especially with Jax having no flash from earlier, needing to flash out of the Yorick wall. Super over greedy from Giles. Maybe just felt pressure to shove in the wave, but maybe should have just backed and TP'd in instead.
and there's now a huge wave, but he is going to be able to collect it using the TP while the walk, but that does give perfect amount of time for the York just to come back to lane, giving yet another lane of teleport advantage.
And York will be picking up the Sheen.
Udyr is still struggling underneath this turret, and is struggling to get the farm as well, rather than just only the health bar.
Yeah, but you know, if there's one champion on the team who doesn't necessarily need farm, it would be that Udyr. Udyr's kind of content to just sit around, do nothing, be weak side. As long as it is the Kayle who is benefiting, everything should be fine. E lands onto Brainer. Brainer has no flash.
Available, might be able to just run down the Orianna without flash available.
And Bone, absolutely lethal, just running around the map picking up kills right now.
Chose to use the TP after realizing the wave was in a bad state for him to get XP and instantly capitalize on Brainer with no flash available.
Yeah, of course, Brainer using that flash earlier to kill Free Julio.
And I feel even if this Udyr is behind, it should still be really easy to lane into this Jax at this point in the game.
Yeah, and just an average York moment. Instantly gets 2 mid plates. So that's going to be a good portion of that mid turret going down. I wish there was a way to see on the observer who actually got that first blood. I already forget. Trying to keep track of who would get fates. Was it the Orianna who got the first kill, or did York kill the Jax first?
I think it was Orianna.
Okay, so if that's true, then even if York manages to take this mid turret, that would only even up the feats, and then we would still have to see 3 objectives go down. Speaking of objectives, Void Grub's been sitting there for about 2 minutes. Nobody's made a move for it.
The objectives don't seem to be the priority. They just both sides are just happy to farm up right now. One team is naturally getting some advantages through laning, and they are the better scaling team. Meanwhile, the blue side, if they are behind, don't really want to take unnecessary fights for objectives. They just need to get to at least their first core items, especially on the Garen and Jax power spikes.
Yeah, and again, this is what I was saying was the problem with that Jax Garen swap was that because the Garen has no flash, no good way to punish the Kayle now that she has those ranged auto attacks.
And currently wave after wave in the top lane has just been crashing into this Garen. So although the Udyr had found it hard in the early game, after switching into the Jax is now struggling almost just as much as the Garen rather than falling behind the tempo of the game.
Yeah, game has definitely been stabilized for MgmaCHEESE. I'm gonna say that they're pretty happy with how it turned out. Although as I say that,
a quick trade.
and not going to follow. The Jax, not very much mana, and then Free Julio, of course, had that empowered W if he needed it. I would say the longer that nothing happens in this game, the more and more you're gonna have to favor MgmaCHEESE for this game 1.
Brainers could still find massive shockwave later up in the game if they do all clump up together, but the Kayle should be completely spaced away from the rest of the team. Both of the players in the bot lane with low mana, both sides probably with very low kill threat.
Yeah, I gotta say, impressive little mechanical play from the Udyr right there. Uses the double R to slow the Jax so he can space out of the Jaxie and then going back in with the E stun. So, nice little movement. Especially a little bit unexpected from Free Julio, the silver player. Always cool to see these lower ranked players having success in these lanes.
It does seem like the Garen is happy just to sit on this turret and farm. Although, I don't know if it's the greatest idea, but the Kayle could probably set up a freeze and get more XP out of this rather than having every wave crash. And so actually it's losing out a little bit of XP, which would help the Kayle even further.
You know, I really don't think Kayle cares that much though. You know, she's definitely the supreme scaling option, and then every single time that she crashes a wave, she can do a little bit of work on this turret. It's already down to half health. So it just depends what you care more about. Do you care about poking out the turret, or do you care about denying the enemy golden XP? And I guess for the KO, she's decided that she just wants to get herself as ahead as possible.
Cage just fall onto Orianna, forcing out the flash. That might be able to create a potential play in the future, but York's relatively low right now, so it's probably going to become later down the line.
Yeah, of course, that one thing to note is that the Yorick took Ignite instead of Flash, so even though the Orianna missed position once, it had to burn the Flash. Ooh, wait.
Relatively nice trade initially, but the sustained damage from the Yorick at this point in the game is able to win out against the Orianna.
Yeah, I guess I spoke too soon. I was going to say that there's no way Orianna walks in range of the cage again, but walks right up to the Yorick to use the Shockwave, just gets the Ignite dropped on her head, and Yorick is now 3-0.
And with the KO push in top lane, this should be first lot of grubs for them as well. And with how much damage it's done to these turrets already, the enemy blue team should have to look to fight this. They can't just give this over for free, because this is going to be a massive boost to their turret damage. Orianna TP's to bot lane to deal with the Udyr, but the Jax has rotated up to the grubs now. Who have already gone down, however. They do have the health advantage. Jax finds the stun onto KO. Garen has also found the silence. Oh, is used by the KO. Damage is coming down onto the Jax. Jax has to be very careful here while going for the KO. Gets another hit off, but does fall. Garen's now left by themselves. Doesn't have any movement speed items at this point in the game either, so it should just be a simple rundown. After the cage comes down as well. No flash to get out of there. Even though he's got the smite, didn't really give him an opportunity to take the fight.
Yeah, it didn't look too bad for those who know it first, but the Orianna TP bot making it 2v2, and then you're thinking, the Garen has ultimate, maybe he can do something, but the Garen's ultimate damage blocked by the Kael's ult damage. Almost got the kill on that Kael, could have made the game look completely different. That silence almost got her into that ult lethal threshold, but at the last moment she was able to click R, block all of that true damage, and then from there it was an easy cleanup for the Yorick.
Garen chooses to TP topside, which just means that they forfeit the mid turret to this Yorick with ult available. That's giving over even more gold and gives over the feat of strength progress as well. Jax also caught in the cage with no flash available, takes a massive chunk of damage. The Yorick is 2 levels up. The minions do keep going, but they don't go for the dive. Udyr also falls really low. Yeah, the Gale's going to have to force the Orianna away from the Udyr to keep him alive. Might be able to put onto the chase with the Nash's Tooth available. Orianna also has no flash as well, but is slowed. And Yorick has also gone back, so the Orianna with the speed boost might be able to get out of there, and does successfully get out alive.
Yeah, maybe Yorick could have moved to get that kill. I didn't get to see how much of mana he had left. I would assume even though just his body standing there would have been enough. New teleport, pretty funny. Pets do not follow the teleport anymore. So anytime that a champion like Yorick or other champions like Iron or Nefiri, anytime that they use that teleport, it takes them a while for their pets to catch up. You could see the Maiden and the Ghouls running at Mach 10 to get back to the lane.
And with the mid turret falling, the middle lane is more extended, which gives more roam availability to the Udyr, now being rotated into mid. York instantly goes for the top tier straight after a TP. Garen tries to defend it, but that might be an overextension at this point. The Yorick is 2 levels ahead of you. And with Trinity Force.
Yeah, the KO insurance not even needed. Looks like Yorick's just going to take this game over completely. Udyr and the KO doing the Dragon right now. So with this, they are pretty close to getting those feats. All they would need is this Rift Herald. And most likely, if they manage to pick up the Rift Herald and the feats at the same time, they'll be able to end this game in just a few minutes.
As long as they don't do anything overly wild, this game is very easy for them to close out, because they have, as I said, the scaling insurance. Also, the Jax and the Garen being behind. Although it's nice to have the Orianna with gold, the two champions, although they can do some things behind, being into a Yorick being the one fed, if it was just the Kael fed, you have Jaxi, you have Silence. But with the Yorick being fed, having Maiden, and the constant damage that can come out from that source as well, probably offsets the fact that these champs do have a Silence and negates auto attacks.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the issue is that even if you manage to blow everything on the Yorick and you get that kill, I don't know without any ultimates if you even have the damage to kill the Udyr afterwards. Udyr, definitely behind, but still an Udyr, still gonna be tanky, has that Unending Despair completed as well.
York's now also looking at the Rift Herald spawn as well. Udyr just back, so he'll have to solo it.
Yeah, now, cool little interaction with Yorick and the Rift Herald here is that the Herald, the eye opens based on how many people are attacking it, so unfortunately, Yorick will not be able to show off the funny Yorick Herald strategy. If he had some ghouls spawned, he could force that eye to open every 2.5 seconds, but
Jax lands the stun. Garen is also very nearby, but has the Berserker's boots also finished, so he should have a bit more movement speed this time around. There is turret in range for the Yorick, so he might be able to just walk this out with a successful cage as well. Buys himself enough space to get ult.
yeah, cages
But they do
both
have
of
to
them.
forfeit the Rift Herald potentially to the blue side, all being up in the area. But that might also be in trade for the KO having a wave on the bot side crashing at the perfect time.
Yeah, so you can see it here with 3 people attacking the Rift Herald. The eye should open every 2.5 to 5 seconds. Just a little tip for everybody watching when you're taking that Herald. Every single different entity who is auto-attacking the Herald will force that eye to open 2.5 seconds faster. So if you're playing a champion like Yorick or Elise, you can take it super fast because each Spiderling and each Ghoul count as their own individual entity, but otherwise, doesn't really matter who you are. If you're only soloing it, you'll only open that eye once every 7.5 seconds. It'll be pretty slow.
But the Rift Herald picked up it delays defeats of strengths for MgmaCHEESE, and we haven't seen teams win off of Rift Herald alone. But Gale has already got half the turret down after taking the first turret in the bot side of the map.
Let's see, I'm seeing a question in chat. Does that mean Urgot will be super good at it too? No, because once again, it's based on each individual entity. Their basic attack will create 1 stack on the Herald. So it doesn't matter how many times you attack it. Each individual entity will only reduce the eye by 2.5 seconds. You would need multiple champions or a champion with multiple pets. I also couldn't tell you if Zyra would work. I don't know if her plants count as auto attacks or abilities. We saw, for example, when Yorick was trying to kill it earlier, that the Maiden, her attacks clearly counted as abilities. It was not opening up the eye any faster.
Maiden is born onto the Jax, and the Ghouls do go across, but Yorick's just more interested in the Grump at this point in the game. Garen does find the KO, but there is a turret nearby. But at this point in the game, it is forced out successfully, but that does mean the KO gets away as well. Yes, is also caught in the cage. It's forced to flash already, but the Yorick just bonks it one more time and secures the kill.
Yeah, both the mid tier 2 and the top tier 2 about to go down here. Even though those who know trying to make a play on the bottom side of the map, crashing the Herald, I don't think this trade is going to be worth it for them at all.
They get 1 turret with the Yorick rather than rotating down, but they've lost the mid turret, they've lost the top turret. No one is available to respond to the Yorick, and the KO is TPing on it as well. They're forced to switch to the TP instead of the recall.
Looks like MgmaCHEESE going for the end. Orianna no ult.
They're safe on the bot side with the Udyr catching the wave as well. Jax does spawn in, and that does seem to be what's going to force back MgmaCHEESE.
Voracious Otacon. Oh.
Jax nearly finds the stun, but doesn't quite, and gets instantly caged. A turnaround from the KO is available. Lines from the KO does land, but the Yorick is just so fed that if 1 and 2 bonks come through and the Garen is already dead, Reyna's got to be really careful, and the Golds take down the Orianna from massive range. Now with Yorick's Maiden available, with Demolish as well, that should be the limiter for the game.
Yeah, nice little quick 20.5 minute win coming out for MgmaCHEESE. Dominant game 1. We'll have to see how they function without that Udyr, without that Yorick for game 2. But good little win for them.